you ever noticed how often the word perfect sneaks into our thinking? The perfect body, the perfect job, the perfect relationship, the perfect life. We're surrounded by messages that tell us happiness lives at the finish line when everything finally falls into place. But here's the reality: when we focus on perfectionism, the finish line will keep on moving. Chasing perfection leaves us anxious, exhausted, and disconnected from the very joy we're attempting to find. The irony is, perfectionism often starts with good intentions. We want to do well, to feel proud, to create something meaningful. But when striving becomes self criticism, progress stops being fulfilling and starts becoming punishing. The real growth, the kind that builds resilience, meaning, and long term happiness, happens not at the finish line, but in the messy middle, the space between where we are and where we want to be. You're listening to The Happiness Hack with Tim Coulson, the podcast where we take a little bit of positive psychology, a little bit of strength based healing, mix it all together to come up with simple, real world applications to bring more joy, more happiness, and more contentment into our everyday lives. And today, we're going to focus on a topic that I know is close to the heart of many: progress over perfection. Perfectionism is often misunderstood. It's not just about making sure everything is right. At its core, perfectionism is a coping strategy. It's a way to protect ourselves from the pain of rejection, failure, or shame. It's our brain's attempt to find safety through overt control. Perfectionism tells us if I do everything right, I can avoid disappointment. If I never make mistakes, I'll finally be enough. If I achieve more, then I'll feel secure. The problem is that perfection is an illusion. It's not a real destination. It's a constantly moving target, because every time we get close, our mind shifts those goalposts. I know this resonates with you, that you've tried to do something and you've constantly striven and driven and more and more. Brene Brown describes perfectionism as a 20-ton shield. It's something we think will protect us, but it's actually what keeps us small, hidden, and disconnected. Because when we chase perfection, we begin to trade authenticity for approval. We trade learning for certainty, and we trade progress for paralysis. Perfectionism and motivation are deeply intertwined. On a neurological level, perfectionism is often driven by the brain's reward system. It's that dopamine that gives us that short-term rush when we achieve something or we receive praise. But here's the catch: dopamine doesn't reward contentment, it rewards pursuit. The moment we achieve what we want, the brain adapts and then looks for that next goal. This is what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill, the exhausting cycle of chasing achievement without ever feeling truly satisfied. Constant striving activates our body's stress response. The sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight mode, stays switched on. We flood our system with cortisol. We're constantly living in a state of arousal because we're constantly striving, constantly pushing ourselves into that mode. Over time, this erodes our creativity, our focus, and our joy, the very things that help us to thrive. When we reach this point, we hit burnout. The solution isn't to lower our standards, but to change the standard altogether, to shift from focusing on being perfect to focus on making progress. Progress is different from perfectionism in one key way: it's process orientated, not outcome orientated. Progress asks, what can I do today that moves me forward, even if it's just a little? Perfectionism asks, how can I get this exactly right, everything exactly perfect right now? Progress builds resilience because it allows for failure. It allows for feedback and flexibility, the very conditions our brains need to learn and adapt. Research on the growth mindset shows that people who focus on learning and effort rather than outcomes and validation experience higher motivation, lower stress, and more long-term success. They begin to see setbacks not as proof of inadequacy, but as opportunities to grow stronger. That's the paradox of progress. When we stop trying to be perfect, we actually grow faster. One of my favorite analogies is about Thomas Edison. He failed to identify the filament for the light bulb 9,000 times. That's a lot of misses. But when he was asked how could he continue going, he simply replied with, "I never failed once. I simply learned 9,000 things that weren't right." That's progress, not focusing on being perfect. This is the joy in the messy middle. Most of our life happens here, between the start and the finish. I want you to think about your own journey. The moments where you learned the most probably weren't when everything was going smoothly. They were when you got challenged, when you were stretched, when things were a little bit uncertain, because that messy middle is where the growth takes root. When we allow ourselves to show up imperfectly, to write the first draft, to try something new, to fail, adjust, review, and improve, we begin to build psychological flexibility. Before I started this podcast, I was terrified of having to make it right every single time. And look, I'll be honest, my first podcasts aren't the refined product, but they are the small steps that got me to here. The more that I can do that, to show up, to review, to adjust, to learn, improve, the more we can adapt and recover from the stress. Because when we build psychological flexibility, joy returns. Not that fleeting dopamine-fueled kind of joy, but the deeper sense of satisfaction that comes from knowing we're evolving. This is why happiness isn't about the absence of struggle. It's about finding meaning within it. Perfection rarely lives in isolation. It is absolutely fueled by comparison, and social media has amplified this problem. We compare ourselves to everyone else's highlights reel, and suddenly our perfectly normal progress feels like failure, because comparison is built on a lie that other people's lives are the benchmark for our own worth. This is what we call extrinsic evaluation, measuring our value based on external validation rather than our inner satisfaction. The antidote? A little bit of self-compassion and a strong dose of self-alignment. Because when we start taking actions that are meaningful to us, suddenly we start to enjoy the progress. When we stop comparing our beginnings to someone else's expert ability, we free up our energy to focus on our own story. Perfectionism thrives on criticism, and often that's our own. Progress thrives on compassion. Research on self-compassion shows that people who are kind to themselves are more motivated, more resilient, and less afraid of failure. Why? Because they don't tie their worth to their outcome. Think about this. How many things have you stopped doing because you couldn't do it perfectly? If you play basketball every day for 10 minutes a day, and you do that for a year, maybe you won't be as good as LeBron James, but you will be better than if you didn't practice at all. Progress over perfection. Self-compassion isn't about lowering the bar. It's about creating a psychological safety net that allows us to grow. When we speak to ourselves with encouragement instead of judgment, we activate our parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and repair state. Our body relaxes, our mind clears, and learning becomes easier. So try this powerful reframe. Instead of asking yourself, why am I not there yet? What more can I do? Start asking yourself, what can I learn from where I am? This is the progress equation. For those of you that have been listening along, you know I love a little bit of equation. So here's today's. Progress equals intention plus effort plus reflection. Let's break that down. The intention gives us direction. Without it, we can wander aimlessly around or chase other people's dreams. When we set ourselves a clear intention, suddenly we can know where we're going to direct our effort. And our effort creates momentum. It's not about the intensity, but it is about consistency. Small gains will outweigh going to the gym once a week compared to going to the gym 3 times a week. It's the willingness to keep showing up. It's not about pushing hard and then stopping. Small gains will add up. And this is where the reflection comes in. We need to turn that experience into wisdom. So pause, look back, ask yourself, what didn't work? Why didn't it? What can I learn from this? The more we do that, the more our progress becomes sustainable. Because together, all three of those ingredients, reflection, effort, and intention, create a cycle of growth where progress is almost inevitable. But that growth depends on persistence, not perfection. Progress fuels our happiness because it activates the brain's sense of reward and purpose simultaneously. Research from Harvard and Stanford has shown that even small wins, like completing a simple task, learning a new skill, keeping a promise to yourself, triggers positive emotions and boosts your motivation. They've called it the progress principle. When you acknowledge your own small wins, you reinforce a growth identity, the belief that you're capable, evolving, and moving forward. This shift changes everything. You stop seeing happiness as something you earn and start experiencing it as something you build. So, how can we practice our progress thinking? Well, I'll give you 3 simple ways to start. You want to build a healthier relationship with your progress by redefining your success. Remember last week when we talked about stopping measuring in outcomes? We want to measure by alignment. Ask yourself, did my actions today align with my values? If the answer is no, then you know what you need to do tomorrow. Because when success becomes about integrity and not perfection, you can start winning more often. You don't need to do everything absolutely right. But if you do most things the way that you want to, all of a sudden you're going to feel better because you want to celebrate those small wins. Your brain thrives on that recognition. Every time you notice a small win, like finishing a walk, completing a task, showing patience, you strengthen your motivation to do it again. So if you're asking yourself, did my actions today align with my values? And the answer is no. Try ending it with, well, what's one thing that I did do well today? Not only are you redefining the success, you're celebrating the small wins. And the most important thing here, guys, is reflect and don't ruminate. Reflection asks, what can I learn? Ruminating asks, what did I do wrong? Why did I do it wrong? One will create wisdom, the other will create worry. Perfection says, I'm be happy when. Progress says, I'm proud that I'm learning, growing, and showing up. The first keeps you waiting for joy. It's always over the horizon. The second lets you experience it now. When you embrace progress over perfection, you give yourself permission to be human, to evolve, to be unfinished, but still happy and brilliant. because happiness isn't a destination, it's a direction. And the most meaningful journeys are never flawless. They're lived one imperfect step at a time. So here's your happiness hack for the week. Each day, I want you to choose one small action that moves you forward. Maybe it's journaling for 5 minutes, reaching out to a friend you haven't spoken to in a while, or take a mindful breath before reacting. Because progress is cumulative. Tiny improvements compound over time. They reshape how you see yourself and how you see the world. Every small act says to your brain, I'm growing, I'm improving. And that message, repeated often enough, becomes your new truth. You stop chasing perfection and start trusting the process. Life opens up again, joy sneaks back in, growth feels lighter, meaning feels closer. Because progress isn't about getting it all right now. It's about staying in the game, learning, adjusting, and moving forward with heart and intention. You've been listening to The Happiness Hack with Tim Coulson. If this resonated with you, I would love for you to like and subscribe. Or better yet, share it with someone who could hear this message too. Because together, we're going to make every day better. And if you're ready to make some real meaningful change in your life, why not book a session with me? tim-coulson.com. That's tim-coulson.com. And as always, guys, remember, the day is what you make it.